Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking to CEOs and business leaders all about their business blunders, you know, the stuff they won't put on their LinkedIn timeline unless they've been right here on this series. And with us on the line is none other than Brenda Florida, the CEO of BrendaFlorida.com. Brenda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Matt.
Well, let's get into the elevator pitch. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to over there.
Well, I am a certified life coach. So my business is, an online private practice life coaching business. That's what I do now. The 30 years before I started this several years ago, I spent my career in real estate. And so a lot of leadership. I didn't do a lot of sales in real estate. I did a lot of leadership, ran companies, things like that. So when I got into life coaching, when I decided to open my private practice, I felt very well prepared, and I was mentally, and for training and all that kind of stuff, so ready to just leap into this new adventure. And what I would say now, the simplest way for me to describe what I do and who I serve is that I help people break the habits that really cause unnecessary stress and limitations. And so I'm very practical in my work. So I give a lot of tools, and I have a very sort of pragmatic approach. But when you think about it, almost every way, and we can get into this with my own epic failure story as an entrepreneur, but all the things in our lives, whether they're in relationships or in our businesses, what keeps us stuck or where we're not doing what we want to do or doing what we don't want to do, there's some sort of habit there that is usually mindset based, that is driven by a series of thoughts. And so by helping people break that pattern, break that habit, however you want to look at it, it creates a very sustainable transformation in people's lives. And that's what thrills me about what I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, man. It's very rewarding and purpose-led work, right? And so who do you work with? I mean, are you working with Matt Brown, the entrepreneur podcaster, or are you working with, the vice president of sales for North America? Are you working with just a wife? Like, who's your kind of sweet spot?
Actually, about all of the above. I've worked with CEOs and founders, entrepreneurs. I've had quite a few, of my clients just because they're in my own network that I've coached, whether it's because they're stuck and feel like they need to pivot but aren't sure what they need to do, or they are trying a lot of different strategies that aren't really working the way they anticipated them and they can't figure out why. So I work with, leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs. I've worked with plenty of men and women who are in unhealthy relationships. Usually it's romantically, sometimes in careers, but romantic relationships where they know they need to go, they know it's not serving them, and they just can't seem to get themselves out. So it's all these ways that we have obstacles in our lives that the people that I work with, by the time they come to me, they know, they have enough awareness to know, they're doing something, they're stuck in some way, they're doing something that's not serving them. But they don't know how to close that gap, right? So there's a big difference between our awareness of something I'm doing isn't serving me in my life, and now I don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's a huge gap. And that's where coaching, or at least the way I coach people, is so powerful, because I can take somebody through the steps they need to close that gap and get them to where they have what you might think of as like a lifestyle change, a sustainable transformation is what I think of it. So that now it's not that they're bouncing back and forth from doing it, not doing it, doing it. No, we've just changed our very trajectory of how we're seeing an issue or operating in an issue. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Great. So let's get into the meat and the potatoes. What is your story of fail for our audience around the world today?
Well, when I started my life coach practice, I invested a lot of money in programs, right? For online marketing and funnels and all the things that probably, every listener has also done. And I have a very strong business acumen already. I'd been running businesses for many years, some of them my own, some of them other people's. And so I felt very prepared to take this leap and start my practice. Super positive. I'm very optimistic by nature. So I had the attitude, I had the skills, I had all the things. And honestly, the best way I could describe it is nothing I did worked. I would duplicate the funnel that gave somebody else their 6-figure launch, and I'd have crickets at mine, and it was so frustrating. But again, because I'm so positive and optimistic, I would just keep thinking, oh, it was just a bad month. I'll just do it again. I need to work on my messaging, all that. And tons of self-judgment. I must be doing something wrong. What's wrong with me? Why is this working for that person and not me? All those kinds of things, until I went from living in a lovely home to not having a home for over 2 years. Like, that's how desperately broke I was. I gave up my apartment because I didn't want to get evicted. So I used some of my last cash to buy myself out of that lease, because I've been in real estate all my life, right? Like, there's this terrible, at least in the US, there's this terrible list. If you ever get evicted, and once you're on that list, man, you can't rent to save your life hardly. So I knew I didn't want to set myself up for that. I was trying to avoid bankruptcy. Eventually, I had to file bankruptcy. I did some house sitting, some staying with family, but who wants to, we're out there, welcome. What I did most of the time was live in Airbnbs for a couple of days at a time, because that was all the cash flow I had. I'd use a couple $100, get a client in, use some of that money, get an Airbnb for a few days. And I can't even tell you the number of times I was within a day of needing to move out and had less than $100 in my bank account. And it was terrifying. I'm single. I don't have a trust fund. And it was, for the first time and I was not a spring chicken. So this was happening when I was in my late 50s. I had remade myself so many times. I had been successful many times before that. And really, I was just like, what the fuck, if I can just say that. I'm good at what I do. I'm doing all these best practices. My attitude's good. Nothing's working. Like, what the actual fuck? And got to the point where it was many times, it was so discouraging to me that I would really mentally try to think out, how could I create like a car accident or something where I could die and just put all this to bed without having to leave my family with a legacy of somebody, their mom, their grandma committing suicide. Because that was not something I was willing to do either. But I just didn't feel like I could get up and face it another day, And so eventually, through all the pain of that, and because I'm at the very heart and soul of who I am a seeker and a grower. And so I guess like a dog on a bone, I just didn't let myself let it go until I figured it the fuck out. And for me, what it was, and this is not the same for everybody, but for me, there was an inner problem that was actually creating the block or the lack of results in the strategy and things I was doing. So the simple version of my big lesson was, there is no strategy that can be better than a limiting belief inside of you. Like, your limiting belief is going to be so much more powerful that it will take a good strategy off the rails and it won't always work. Now, that's not true 100% of the time, of course. But what I found as I peeled back the layers for myself was that ultimately, at a subconscious level, I didn't feel worthy of this life I wanted to create and that I was imagining myself in, that I could see myself in. And even though I could check all the boxes for all the Abraham Hicks manifesting stuff. I was doing all that, except that deep down, I didn't really believe I was worthy of it. And so it wasn't happening. And so I had to go, heal that, so to speak. It's not really something to fix. It's something to transform, to heal, so that my inner world matched what I wanted in the outer world.
So what did that whole experience teach you? Is it really about becoming self-aware enough to recognize limiting beliefs that you may have about yourself that are so powerful that you wind up in situations like the one that you were in, which sucks, right? I mean, I can't even imagine, maybe when I was like 18, you know what I'm saying? Like, and kind of like doing late night clubbing and stuff. And then I was like hovering on people's couch and stuff. But you know what I mean? Like, I think the opportunity there I'm imagining as a lesson here for everyone is to become self-aware enough to recognize when you are limiting yourself. And I think whether that's through self-destructive behavior or limiting beliefs or whatever, like these things are important to and in terms of even having the courage to just tackle them. You actually have to do the work, like the hard work on yourself. I mean, even like in the context of scaling companies, like, I really believe that a company will only get to a certain size if you grow to that similar certain size too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. A company does not do better than its leader, right? Like exactly. we're always, so yes, I mean, that's my big takeaway. And, it's interesting because one of the things I do in my work, is teach leaders about emotional intelligence and creating healthy teams. Okay. So when I'm in that role and I'm the teacher and I'm getting, and I'm able to work with other leaders, I mean, I love that because it helps me have a lot of different perspectives on leadership. But part of the key there is exactly what you said. It's first that self-awareness. Like the most important quality to me of a leader for how effective they are. Okay. And so I mean effective in a really healthy, holistic way. They can help the company grow. People like working for them. It's a good, it's got all the things we all say we want. Is their emotional intelligence, which starts with self-awareness. But the tricky piece is, and this is what tripped me up for a while on my own journey in that failure, is that, first of all, self-awareness is the beginning. And often we think, especially when we're, smart, ambitious people, right? That's what we are. And so I think, well, once I'm aware of it, I should just be able to, whatever, get rid of it, disempower it, stop doing it, whatever, because I have the awareness. But awareness is, step one out of about 20 from being aware something's not serving you and actually behaving differently, thinking and behaving differently. There's such a big gap there. And I think we underestimate how big that gap can be. And so it drives self-criticism, self-judgment, and all kinds of other things in that. So I think that was one of my big lessons, and how that sort of intersects with the second piece, which is that consciously, what I was thinking in my conscious mind was that I absolutely was worthy and deserved everything I wanted. My problem was not in my conscious mind. It was in that 90% or so, tell us, that is in your subconscious mind. That sense of unworthiness was in my subconscious. So it's very confusing. And I work with clients a lot on this when we hit something that is a limiting belief. And then they're like, but wait, I don't even believe that, right? Like in our conscious mind, it's like, no, that's not true. But because it's so deeply embedded subconsciously, and our subconscious mind is more powerful and impactful on our day-to-day thinking and our actions day to day, that will override what you're thinking consciously. So it can be kind of confusing, frankly, and I think it's why it took me so long to figure it out, because I really didn't believe it on a conscious level. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But I want to just change gears for a moment.
Yeah.
If you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and go back to that time of your life, would you change it?
Ugh.
Or what would you change?
Ultimately, probably not. I mean, I'd like to think I don't ever want to live through it again. But oh my gosh, like all terrible things that happen to us or that get created in our lives, I learned so much out of it. I'm really grateful for it now. I mean, I know it's made me a much better coach. It's made me a stronger leader, a stronger entrepreneur. So I'm grateful for all the gifts from it. I would not want to have to do it over again, but I am grateful for the gifts from it. And I'm not sure I would have gotten them. Like for me, I think the intensity of it and how long it lasted. Like I was in that 2.5 years, not 2.5 months or 2.5 minutes, 2.5 years. And so to be on that sort of ragged edge of, that close to living on a park bench for that long, for me was incredibly stressful, but it is what drove me to keep digging deeper so that I could find this, lump of coal that I then turned into a diamond, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think it's, even though hindsight's a perfect science, I don't think you go back in time to change it because you can't. Like, I mean, it became, these sorts of experiences mold you into who you are today.
Yes.
And also, by the way, like when you tell the story, it's kind of like, oh shit, like this is what, Brenda rather is all about. You know what I'm saying? Like Brenda was there and now she isn't. She was at the lowest of the low and, now look at her. And I think that's what inspires people.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So what is your advice to CEOs and entrepreneurs, Brenda, about, the importance of failing in business success?
I think two things that really come to mind for me are that one, that inner journey is ultimately going to be more important than whatever the strategies are. Now, you can't be without strategy. You can't be without a financial, system and program and the funnels and the things. Okay, so you have to have those. But frankly, I think those are the easier things to grab onto because they're so tangible. And so, but what I have found in so many entrepreneurs that I've coached, I mean, I would say probably every single entrepreneur that I coached, whatever was keeping them stuck or from being able to figure out how to pivot or whatever the thing was, the answer always came inside of them, not from a program and not from a strategy. It was that they did the inner work to either figure out what those it's usually a combination of two things, figuring out my limiting beliefs and what delights me and what are my desires. And delight and desire to me are an absolute blueprint for who we are authentically, for finding our truth, knowing our truth, and living our truth. And delight and desire are a river, not a rock. So what delights me and what my desires are may be different tomorrow than today. Certainly in business, things move so fast. What delights me to do in my work today may not delight me in a year. And so instead of ignoring that and forcing myself into the thing that everybody said was going to be so awesome, I will stay with my desire, with my own delights. And I think that's what really creates sustainable success, is being in alignment with our own truth. And so those components of emotional intelligence, that's why those to me are so important and integral to all of it, because they help us find that and then communicate it out to our people so that we can get buy-in for that vision for everybody who has more than a solo entrepreneur, which is what I am now, but not what I've done in the past. I've had teams and hundreds of people I needed to get to come with me on that journey. And so that the combination of the inner work and staying in your truth helps you create that buy-in and vision for your people to bring them with you as well.
I love it. Brenda, What about books, tools, and resources that you recommend CEOs use? What comes to mind for you?
So my two favorites are the two that I tend to use when I teach, which are Emotional Intelligence 2.0. There's a bunch of it. All the emotional intelligence books are good. That one I like particularly because it has an assessment that when you buy the book, you get the assessment you can take from the Talent Smart folks. But to me, the combination of self-awareness and empathy are the two most important characteristics any CEO, I don't care who your client is, what you're doing, what you're selling, what you're serving, any of it. The ability to have self-awareness and empathy are the two most important things. And it's what a lot of people don't focus on. So it ends up healing a multitude of problems when you get there. And then the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And again, I tend to teach off the principles of that. And that starts with self-trust, that whatever is breaking down and dysfunctional in your team, usually the foundation of it is a break of trust, which takes you back to that. If I'm the leader, empathy and self-awareness. Where am I creating that? Where am I not being empathetic so my people aren't trusting me? Like, it's such a great whole way, WHOL whole way to look at ourselves and our business. I mean, I read a ton of business books and there's a lot I like, but those two are very foundational to what I've built and what I've helped other people build.
Amazing stuff. Brenda, you're a true powerhouse, dude, and I think your story is truly inspirational. But that does conclude your time in the hot seat. But thank you for being vulnerable, man. I think your story is, it's an important one to share. Not everybody has, your unique experience. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you for having me, Matt. I loved it.
Anytime. Thanks, everyone. See you again soon.